Okay.
They all now.
Okay. All right, great. Good to go.
Check, check.
And if everyone can take a moment to silence your cell phones, that'd be great. Thank you. 6 weeks. 6. 6 weeks. Yeah.
That much assurance, self-assurance and calm, 6 weeks.
Natural. All right, it looks like everyone is here tonight. I want to thank you all for coming out.
We're waiting for one.
Oh, we're still, okay, I saw him walk in. I'm sorry, 2, 4, 5. Okay, we have 6. Okay, thank you. And some of you may have noticed some comment cards on the table right outside of the chambers. That is for you all to fill that out. If you have a question that you would like to ask any of our chief candidates, you can fill that out right now and give that to me, and we'll select several of them. We'll kind of mix them up, and I'll just randomly select 3. So if you guys want to take that opportunity, the comment cards are right on the table. Okay.
Each candidate is asked every one of these 4 questions.
Yep. So good evening, everybody. My name is AJ Walker. I am the moderator for tonight, along with Chief Rick Jenkins from North Palm Beach. He is joining us. He will be asking the questions to our chief candidates. I am the public information officer for the city, so I've been with the city for just about 6 weeks, and I'm very happy to be here. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer their question. And at the end, we will have a bonus 1-minute round where we will go through some of the comment cards that you all have tonight. If you filled those out and you want to bring those over to me, we'll get to those questions as well. For now, we're going to get into it, and I will introduce you to our candidates. I'm going to go, we've gone and
Thank you for allowing me to help the city in this process. It's an honor. For Tanya Chapman, what measures will you implement to bridge the trust of police officers with this community?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to sit before you all today. So what measures I would bring to help bridge the gap in the community? I had the fortunate situation to come from an organization that the city had no reason to trust the police. So I implemented several initiatives there that built those trusting relationships with the police department, and I intend to do the same as well. First, after a period of learning and observing, a period of observation and finding out what the issues are, listening to my officers, listening to my citizens, going around to different I have to remember today, going around to different civic groups, and some of the initiatives would be, one, a CEO walk, my community engagement opportunity walk, where I would take members of my command staff as well as my officers, community leaders, our faith leaders, and we would walk the community and talk to individuals, knock on every door within this community, and find out what the issues and concerns are, And that leads to trust among the citizens. And also relationships is look to our youth. The youth are our future. So I started a tutoring program. I partnered with a local institution that tutored kids. So we tutored first and second graders once a week to help them with their reading skills because they are our future. I'll look at what we're doing as far as our PAL program, our Police Athletic League, our Explorers program, possibly a cadet program, and other activities. I also partnered with the Parks and Recs. We did midnight basketball for individuals 18 to 28 years of age. So they would have something to do from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. During the midnight hours. And I will bring those initiatives as well as others, see what's going on in the community and how the community and the police department can partner together to build those trust and relationships going forward.
Thank you. Next question is for William Gordon. What is your plan to decrease the juvenile gun violence that's plaguing the city of Riviera Beach?
Again, let me express my thanks for allowing me to come to the city of Riviera Beach. It's felt like I never left home coming from down south in Lauderhill. This has been a great opportunity. Thank you. As far as reducing gun violence, there are several components to that. One, of course, is education and understanding what the dynamics that can happen when juveniles are involved in gun violence. Of course, there'd be a strict enforcement of gun violence, utilizing the technological resources that the city already has through the Shot Spotter program, being able to respond quickly to that. But getting folks out there, getting them to experience and maybe have demonstrations of the trauma that weapons cause. We also have to incorporate community involvement, understanding that there are other ways and teach about other ways to handle adversity and conflict, and that it doesn't have to result in gun violence. Going to the extreme measure of wanting someone using a weapon is the ramifications of it will ripple through our communities, and they tear families apart, and they'll leave those gashes for generations to come because of what one person may have done to someone else. Using the enforcement, the education, incorporation of different community events, gun buyback programs, getting education out there, not glorifying weapons. We can go through our Explorer program and teach weapons safety courses. As I grew up and went through the Boy Scouts and went through Police Explorers, I had exposure to weapons. I learned about weapon safety. I learned about what they could do. It's not the glorification of it, it's the education of those weapons and the trauma and the damage that they can do to our communities. Reaching out, incorporating those different programs so juveniles have something else to do. We have implemented a PAL program in Lauderhill, a boxing program that teaches them about conflict and adversity and the dynamics of boxing and how it incorporates and how you can handle things in a civil manner, not just going out there and hurting someone about it.
Thank you. Next question is for Reno Wells. How will you address the active drug houses in Riviera Beach?
Well, first of all, that would be a part of my 5-year plan, which is 4 goals: reducing crime, community engagement, reducing the budget. Reducing crime and reducing budget is interrelated. Part of my community engagement program, I wanted to attach the COP unit with my code enforcement and to really, truly throw down on a rapid enforcement with our abatement, with the nuisance abatement. As far as the torn down houses, we got to try to notify the landlords. Drugs are being sold there. violent crimes is being conducted there. That's the first step I would take. I also try to partnership with the state's attorney's office to see if we can get a stiffer sentence for the violators of drugs in our community, especially with the school zone. I've noticed when I was here before, we would arrest them for selling drugs within a school zone, and they get slapped on the wrist. Putting that charge, selling the drugs within a school zone, it only stiffens the bail for them to get out of jail, which it does us no good. They need to stay there a lengthy time. And also what I would like to see, especially those guys, come before this panel at this podium and give my city a public apology for selling drugs at the early age, mentoring in school. I was part of a program called Fathers Forever, and we targeted the young boys to try to get them back on the right track. In addition to that, we also have to have people that believe in the community, give us a phone call. You don't have to leave your information where you are. Let us know where the drugs are being trafficked at, and we eradicate it. And as you know, if we push them from the south in the city, they wind up on the north in the city, or they go to another city. And that's a problem. But we really need to get serious on the punishment. I don't believe it's stiff enough. And unfortunately, in my line of work, wherever there's drugs, there are guns. Same thing. One comes with the other.
Is that it, Mr. Wells?
You want me to talk some more?
Nope. Just trying to make sure. I thought it was maybe a pause.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question is for Nathan Osgood. How will you make the community safer?
Thank you, Chief. First of all, community, thank you for coming out tonight. I wish we can fill this room even more every night when I'm here. But how would I make the community safer, sir?
Yes, sir. The question is, how will you make the city of Riviera Beach safer?
Good question. First of all, I'm going to reduce crime in the city of Riviera Beach. I'm going to target all violent crimes. And the way I want to do that, sir, is through intelligent-led policing. We're going to take all of our data and pay attention to all of our violent crime. Okay, thank you. All of the violent crime and the drug dealers, the gang units in the city, and we're going to target them. And the way we're going to do it, after we get the information, we're going to get our data, we're going to collect it. We're going to work with our surrounding agencies, your agencies as well, all the federal municipalities, and we're going to target all of our drug dealers, the gang unit. And not only are we going to target them, we're going to do it in phases. We're going to do a first stage of, first of all, surveillance, who's who, identify the players. We're going to go back and make arrests, undercover purchases, buys if necessary, even drugs if they're buying, if they're selling guns. We may sell guns from them. We will introduce confidential informants, sources. We will engage the community to get them more involved to say something. We will also, through an enforcement phase, do our roundup. We will plaster their names and faces on boards behind us, on TV, to embarrass them. So we're gonna stamp out crimes by, one, shaming them out, arresting them, and then every time there's a drug arrest, every time there's a gun arrest, every drug arrest is associated with something more. So it's not gonna stop there. We're gonna spin it off into a further investigation. So by using intelligent-led policing, sir, collecting the data, going after the targets, and making arrests is the best way to do it. And you get the citizens involved through anonymous tips and by engaging them, going out to the community and having conversation with them openly. So you got to do it undercover and with the uniformed personnel.
Thank you. The goal of this process, one of the goals is for everyone to be asked the same questions at some point. So if I miss you on a particular question that you're just itching to answer, if I don't get to you when we get to the public comments section, please bring that to our attention so that you can address that question. Okay. Next question's for Tanya Chapman. What's your plan to decrease the juvenile gun violence that's plaguing the city of Riviera Beach?
As far as reducing juvenile gun violence, the first thing you have to do in order to reduce gun violence is identify those individuals that are perpetrating the crimes. You need to be very strategic and intentional in your efforts. You need to be very specific on identifying the areas where the gun violence is occurring, and that can be done through intelligence-led policing, through your CompStat. And CompStat is a monthly process or weekly process, however often you decide to meet. When you divide the city up, and that will be my intention, it's already divided up into geographical areas, but to have individual commanders assigned to those geographical areas and hold them accountable, make them responsible for the crime in that area. For them, it will be up to them to identify where the crime is occurring and who is wreaking havoc on our communities. Because we all know in this room, there's only a small group of individuals that are wreaking havoc in your communities, and you know who they are. So it's up to that supervisor, that commander, to one, identify the areas that need attention, identify the subjects that we need to pay more attention to, and develop those cases on those individuals. Find out if there's warrants out there, find out there are other entities that are looking at them as well, do some deconfliction, partner with surrounding area, your federal FBI, ATF, federal individuals to work together to partner and going forward. So once you identify those individuals and you build those cases, then you start making arrests. And once those arrests are being made, you put officers in that neighborhood the entire time, but you need to put officers in the neighborhood not only to focus on individuals that are wreaking havoc on the crime, but also individuals that are culturally competent and able to help build up that community as well. And once those arrests are made, you need to identify the guns. Where are the guns coming from? So often police departments do not research where guns are coming from. The youth can't buy the guns. So you go back to the source of the guns, and you go back to the original gun owners and everyone in between to trace where those guns are coming from. And you start knocking on doors, and not to violate their Second Amendment rights, but to make them aware that their gun is being used in the commission of the crime. Gun owners are usually responsible owners, and they will take ownership of it, and they will change their behavior once they know the guns are intact. But making those arrests and written out that in the community.
Thank you. Next question's for Spencer Rozier. What measures will you implement to bridge the trust of police officers with the community?
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to be here. And even before I get started, I would like to give my condolences to Officer Derek Jackson's family. We recently lost him, and I want to acknowledge and thank him and his family for his 17 years of service with us. So I have an acronym that I use that I think are the primary things the citizens of Riviera Beach want from the police department. It's called TAPE, and that's trust and transparency, accountability, professionalism, and engagement. So one of the things we try to do on a regular basis is engage the community. We have our COP unit, we have our SRO unit, which is a school resource officers program, and our community policing unit. But still, even greater than that, the philosophy of the Riviera Beach Police Department is community policing, which means it's every officer's responsibility to engage the community. And like I often tell them, someone may not want to talk to me, but they may know you personally, and they may give you information that we can use as a police department to address their situation. So it's important for all of us to engage the community. But we try to regularly attend all the community community-based associations, such as our Park Manor Association, our South Side Coalition Associations, at various events that's held by our CRA unit. If any community member have an event and invite us there, we try to make sure that we have representation there. So we do a lot of engagement already, but we can always do more. And I try to personally engage in a lot of those community-based meetings myself personally. We recently had a series that Mr. Councilman Lawson hosted throughout the city, and it was called When They See Us. And it was based on an incident that happened years ago in the city of New York where these kids were arrested and gave false statements because of the interrogation techniques that were used against them. And we were part of that panel, and at every series, I was there, even though I wasn't required to be there until the last series. I made sure I was at each series there with my officer, filling the questions about why police do what they do. And that's the only way the relationship can get better. It's communications. We may not agree on everything, but by communicating, we eventually reach a better understanding and help provide better service to the community.
Thank you. Next question's for Michael Coleman. How will you address active drug houses in Riviera?
Thank you, Chief Jenkins. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the city manager and staff for allowing me to be part of this process. It's been an amazing process, and I thank everyone for coming out. First of all, drug houses, you need the confidence and the trust of the community to be able to work with you. What I do, a lot of people are afraid to communicate what's taking place in their communities. What I developed in my previous job are hotspot cards. Your hotspot cards, you don't have to call 911 to reveal and report crime in your community. You can fill out a card and then pass that information on to your organization, drop it in the mailbox, and then that information gets disseminated through to the director departments. That's for reporting crime in your neighborhood. Secondly, we have a crime analyst department, and that crime analyst department would get the information and triage all the locations in your city. And once we get information, we do a linkage analysis of all the drug houses in the city, and based on the active in those houses, we'll deploy our resources, especially our high liability units, and we'll go out there and do our buy bust, and do our drug buy, do undercover reverse stings, work with code enforcement. Code enforcement is one of the most powerful units in any organization because they can go into a house, go into a property and enforce it, and you can find out what people are doing in your home and in partnership with them. And then once we do that, you'll work with, you'll execute your search warrant on those houses. And then my high liability units of search warrants, I want to work directly with the state attorney's office, meet with those guys on a weekly basis, and bring those individuals in, and after the search warrant, we file directly with the state attorney's office and prosecute those individuals to the full extent of the law. And then some of those houses that's continuous habitually in the neighborhood, we'll do a nuisance abatement and probably seize the houses once they do it multiple times. You can't have a house in the community that's continuously selling drugs out of a house before we take it to the next step. And then how to get information out about the drug activities in the neighborhood. You have to do continuous communication with the youth early on, because a lot of times they're your runners and they're involved in the drug activities in the drug houses. But if it's a large drug operation, I will partner with my other agencies, my PBSO. I'll partner with West Palm Beach. I will partner with North Palm Beach. And you put a multi-jurisdictional task force together, and you go out there and start targeting those individuals in those neighborhoods. And drug dealers move from city to city. And those homes that they have the drug activity, we just target them and make sure that we hold them accountable for the acts in the neighborhood.
Thank you. Skipping around a little bit, next question's for Nathan Osgood. And should I err and ask you the same question twice, please let me know.
Yes, sir.
All right. That's not
I'll just
uncommon.
answer a little better next time.
Mr. Osgood, how will you address active drug houses? Did I already ask you that?
You did not, however, when you asked me the question about how would I keep our communities safer, I veered it right into going into drugs because that's my background. But keeping your community safer is addressing crimes, active drug houses. So what I would do, again, everybody in the community know which houses are drug houses. They know the drug players. So we're gonna collect our data through confidential source and informants and through our undercover detectives. And also through our road patrol police officers who will be circling the streets. We're going to take a look at the players who get arrested and who get field interrogated. We're going to address this. Again, I go with intelligent-led policing because it's so effective and zeroing in on the small percentage of the people who are committing your crimes. So we're going to commence with undercover operations. Once we get these undercover operations done, we're going to work collectively in task force. You don't want to make one buy on a subject and arrest him. You're going to see his criminal record, his criminal history. If that person scores high enough on a certain scale, you're going to go down to your U.S. Attorney's office and speak to the U.S. Attorney and see where this person is going to fit in the federal system, provided we make enough drug arrests from this person to get him off the street. So we're going to target all the drug houses, all the drug dealers. And the way you do that, sir, you work collaboratively with your surrounding agencies, with the federal government, FBI, DEA, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and you make these drug buys for them from these targets. When you get them, you continue the investigation into the next level. Every one crack cocaine rock is associated to a poppy field somewhere, a large cocaine organization. And you keep running that operation until you get to the bottom line, and eventually you will stamp out the drug houses in that community. And once you get that drug house, then you can start filing nuisance abatements. You've been warned once, and two, depending on how much money and what they know about it. And you can work on federal asset seizures or forfeitures for that property. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next question's for Reno Wells. Mr. Wells, what measures will you implement to bridge the trust of police officers with the community? And have I asked you that question before?
No, sir, you haven't.
All right.
Thank you. Well, the first thing I noticed when I was working in my years is that when we tell the community that we're going to do something, we have to come out and really do what we say, and we have to live up to that example that we're trying to set. Secondly, as far as me bridging the community, bridging the trust of the community, while I would be working, especially on Sundays, I would enter into the churches that we have. I would go into all the businesses that we have in the city and introduce myself to those people and ask them what their issues are. And sometimes I would knock on the doors of some of the citizens, give me your concerns. And once I find out the concerns, I'll lay out some strategies how I'm going to handle that issue, handle the concerns. But I notice that builds the trust. All people want you to do is get out your car, to speak to them, give them a few words. We can't stereotype the kids, which I found myself kind of teetering to one time. I saw a young man over in Imperial Plaza, had dreads, and I said, you better get out of here. He told me, hold on. He ran across the street. I'm thinking now, what is he going to get? Is it a weapon? He comes back, he gives me his report card, and he has straight A's and B's on his report card, letting me know that he is not who he looks like or what we perceive him to be. Secondly, we need to have them to work with us, work aside of us, and we don't do that enough. We have the programs, we deterred away from it. Prior, about 13 years ago, we had the PAL program, we had the crime prevention program in our city, and we let those programs go. Right there was a breach of trust when we let those programs go. We allowed it to go. We destroyed our brand. We let them know that, hey, we won't be here for you. We've arrested suspects on the street. We've promised the CIs that they will not know your identification, but the next thing you know, the state's attorney letting them know who the CI is, the confidential informant, and that doesn't help us at all. We come out sometime and, we have to say this, everybody wants transparency, but nobody wants to be transparent. We'll get out the cars, talk to a guy a rude way. He responds to us in a rude manner. Then we want to bestow upon him our office of authority. Well, it's wrong to do that because we spoke to him wrong. We should know that we spoke to him, he or she, in a wrong manner, and we should expect the same thing back when we get it. Secondly, I know this is a sensitive subject. We're just going to be real about this. The shootings we have and all the bad shootings that we are having, how can he trust me? It's sad. we have a certain part of the population, the demographics, know I'm getting pulled over by the officer. I've pulled the people over on the traffic stop. They're moving around in the cars. They're playing with the kids. They're having fun. They're not expecting to be shot. Okay? You shouldn't have to feel that you're going to be shot when you get pulled over in a traffic stop. So we got to do something to diminish that.
Thank you, sir. Next question's for Spencer Rozier. How will you make the community safer?
Okay. One of the things we're currently doing right now, we have what we call our Operation Safe Streets. I'm sure people of the community probably heard of the recent shooting that we had right on MLK Boulevard. We had a lady and a child, infant in the car, along with a pregnant female, and they unloaded with an AK-47 on that car. Fortunately, and thank God, no one was killed. One lady was shot, and the other one was injured from fragments from the bullets in that car. And we had another shooting later on, and we weren't waiting for the next one to happen. We gathered our intelligence of who was involved, who we felt was involved, and the reason the car was shot, and we immediately targeted those people we thought were involved in that shooting. We identified what was going on, and it was related to a previous shooting where a homicide occurred. They thought they were getting revenge on the person who they thought shot their loved one, but it was other people in the car at that time. We didn't waste any time. We did make an arrest in that situation and identified another suspect that we're still investigating, and we immediately, with the blessings of City Manager Evans, started what we call our Operation Safe Streets, where we brought additional personnel in to target the areas where the shootings were occurring. We also identified other people that we know are threats to this community. And as I say, it's an ongoing thing. I can't reveal too much because it's an ongoing investigation, but we took those things seriously, and that's what we do here. We do a lot of things right over the years, and I know a lot happens in the city, but it's not like the police department is currently sitting on its backside not doing anything. If you look at the history of the department from since I've been here, even before that, crime has been reduced over 50-some% on a gradual, continuous basis, but we still need to do more because it's still happening. Even this year alone, I have the first 6 months statistics for this year, and violent crime has been reduced 14% so far the first half of the year, but we got to do more. So we take it very seriously. We know the times violent criminal activity occurs usually during the holiday period when children are out of school during those times, and that's when we beef up our staff, have additional patrol, and we target the areas that we know we have the most violent crime and the shots fired and the individuals creating that, and we target those areas and we take it very seriously, and we do everything we can to eradicate that activity in the community.
Thank you. Next question's for William Gordon. What measures will you implement to bridge the trust of police officers with the community?
The first thing that everyone needs to realize is, and especially the officers, is that the police are the public and the public are the police. We are part of the community. And part of the things that we have to do is get out there and engage, and it sounds simple, but it's going to take a long time to build that trust. Trust is very easy to lose and very hard to win back. Getting out there and engaging face-to-face opportunities, some of the different things that we've implemented in the city of Lauderhill to earn that trust is through our community policing unit, our crime prevention people. Our city is divided up much like Riviera Beach. I have a crime prevention officer assigned to each district. I also have a civilian that is known as a community liaison that we have working for the agency, someone who has lived and worked and been in the community for years and years, that knows everybody, has the trust of the community. And through different programs of getting out, being engaged, showing the human side of law enforcement, that we are people, we are part of this community, and we're no different, no better, no special than anybody else. The authority given to the police department is by the citizenry. and we have to respect that. We will police as the citizenry wants us to. Some of the different ideas that I have is a neighborhood engagement team. Those officers will get out there. They can be permanently assigned to specific areas, zones, districts, and they get out there and they know the people. Get out of the cars, do walk and talks, engage with the different communities. One of the other programs that we've established is a clergy program where we have members of all the different churches. In my city, we have 2 Orthodox Orthodox temples. We have a mosque. We engage with all of them. We bring all those ministers together because they can give us different information and they can get it out to their congregations and their community. It's all about being part of it. The city currently has great community engagement programs that we can continue with and we can foster more. It's getting out there and being a part of everything, showing the human side of law enforcement and understanding that we are part of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next question's for Michael Coleman. What measures will you implement to bridge the trust of police officers with the community?
First of all, I have my philosophy in law enforcement is community policing. And with that community policing philosophy, it's a top-down approach. Every sworn and non-sworn individual within the organization will have to buy into the community policing philosophy. It's not that they want to buy into it. Everything will be tied in into that philosophy. What I will do, I will have an open police department. It won't be closed. That when it becomes very transparent, individuals want to come in and ask questions, they're more than welcome to come in. My door will always be open, first of all, and I'll make myself the lead of that. Secondly, what I would do is have different engagements in the community. You, like Mr. Gordon said, you have your walk and talks in the communities. In my previous career, I created a clergy group, and I met monthly with my clergy group to have a dialogue with those individuals. Also, you have communities that not part of government, don't want to be part of government. You have a Haitian and Latino community. I want to go to those communities and be a voice for the voiceless. So I'll make sure I hire people as well who understand the demographics of this city, and I'll deploy them. So a lot of people who don't understand their first language is not English, I will deploy them to ensure that I'm representing them as well. A lot of things that we all have talked about, that I will have a reading program. So the kids, when they're young, they can really appreciate 2 prongs: trust me and learn how to read better. HOA meetings, I would definitely bring in a community liaison person to formalize all those HOAs in the city of Riviera Beach. So when you have a cleanup, we all on one page, one accord. I will have a coffee and donut with the chief and executive staff. We'll find an area, crime-ridden area, or people who have lack of trust for law enforcement, and I have the executive team go out there and just have a casual conversation with those individuals in those communities to build that trust. It's the small things. I would also like to have a citizen police academy to teach those individuals in the community about what we do in Riviera Beach Police Department. That'll give them an understanding on how we train, how we communicate, our deployment, our procedures, so they have a better understanding on what we do as an organization. Community cleanups. I will work closely with Public Works because I know law enforcement can't do it all by themselves. I will go out there and do cleanups with those individuals and then get to know those individuals we work side by side with them to build that community trust.
Thank you. Next question's for Tanya Chapman. How will you address the active drug houses?
Okay, as far as addressing active drug houses, first of all, you need participation or cooperation from the community. So going back to building those trust and relationships, you need to sit down and have those conversations, go to those civic association meetings, and have those conversations about what's going on in the community. Once those conversations have taken place and they have an understanding, meaning the community, of what your role is, what you're going to do to take action to rid their community of those drug houses, then you make cases. You determine, you put your narcotics unit, any other specialized units, and build those cases, whether it's drug buys, get search warrants, work with your state's attorney's office to get what is the resources that are needed to take back those houses. You need to reach out to the landlords if it's an ongoing problem. Find out who owns the house, like it was said earlier. Get code enforcement involved, and if possible, get those individuals moved out the house. If not, you go forward with your search warrants, you make the arrests, and then, high visibility patrol to ensure that those initiatives are not coming back on the part of the drug house. In my former agency, we had something called Crime Sweep. And so we partnered with surrounding jurisdictions, state police, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Attorney General's Office, and we brought in all the resources needed to take back those communities, to take back to address those drug houses. You need to do the search warrants. You need to make those high-profile arrests, and put it in the media. Make sure individuals within the community know that you have gotten rid of this particular house and that it's not going to be tolerated in the neighborhood. So letting all the officers know that they need to step up their patrols in that area to deter some of the activity. When I went into one of my former agencies, at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, there were open-air drug markets, and, the individuals weren't even moving when the police came. So that told me that police work had not been done for a while. And so it's important for me as the chief to make sure that my officers are doing their due diligence, that they're getting out the cars, that they're patrolling the areas, and they're not tolerating issues such as either open-air drug markets or those drug houses to fester in neighborhoods. But it goes back to the cooperation from the community. I need your help. Police can't be everywhere at once. We need you all to speak up and be the eyes and ears and to report that information to the police department.
Thank you. Next question's for Reno Wells. How will you make the community safer?
Once again, this was 21st century policing. If you align yourself with the 6 pillars, trust and legitimacy, policy and oversight. I think we really need to do a lot with our policy concerning our troops within the station itself, the policy on how we do business with the public. Secondly, I heard some things, and I think one thing we need to tap on, a lot of those houses, we have the young mothers who are receiving HUD benefits. There's laws that we can easily apply to get her out of that program if her boyfriend is selling drugs on the property under the Section 8 laws. Next, our community engagement have to be a really involved program. Not just we just knocking on doors and shaking hands with people. We want to knock in doors, see if we can get them to form a neighborhood coalition that may have been said before. We go to the neighborhood meetings, we find out what the issues are, and then we set up a task force that we can attack those issues. I also believe we need to form a multi-agency task force because we may need help. The larger the drug problem, the more help we may need. Form a multi-agency task force to come in this city and help us eradicate some of the problems that we need. We need help from the city attorney's office, either employ a private attorney and let them know that, hey, if you can take this house because it's violating the nuisance abatement codes, you can take this house, we'll give you a certain percentage of that house, just so we can try to eradicate that because it takes it a while. I used to work in the forfeiture program. We can forfeit the homes, we can forfeit the cars. I think I must have forfeited about 65 cars due to drug activity. You transported drugs, we're taking your cars. You selling drugs out the house, it's a longer process, but we take your home. And that's one way we can hit them in a punitive matter. Then we really need help from our senators and our congressmen who come ask us for our vote every year or every other year, that they'll go up to Tallahassee. We have to strengthen our laws. I don't know how many times I've arrested the same young man over and over again with a firearm, And then, unfortunately, the next time I read about that young man, he's committed a crime or killed somebody. So we really need help from them. It's going to have to be a team effort. It starts with the home on raising children. Quite naturally now, the grandparents and aunts are raising the kid. So all of those things, it's a problem we've been dealing with, but I think we can do it for one period. I worked undercover narcotics. We had eradicated the problem for about 5 years on this one particular street, and then it came back.
Thank you, sir. Next question's for Nathan Osgood. What is your plan to decrease the juvenile gun violence that's plaguing the city of Riviera Beach?
That's an excellent question, and it's a real problem. Juveniles have been fascinated with guns from the beginning of time, seems like. First of all, we have to get to our schools. Let's start with our schools. I would have a plan to have not just our school resource officers, but we're going to send police officers to the schools and have this police officer to educate students on the danger of guns, first of all. A lot of gun shooting and accidents that I've come to find out, a lot of it with juveniles were accidents, where they picked up their father's gun and they're fascinated by it, and boom, next thing you know, they shot somebody, or they took it to school and shot someone and playing around. The other part of it is you target the kids who are known violent kids. Before they commit a crime, you have a conversation with that kid and his parents. And then you can send that kid to a diversion program, what we have in Broward, through the courts, and tell them this is the path this kid is going down. So we have to intercept it before it happens. We have to be proactive before the kids start committing violent crimes or gun violence. The other part of it is we have to educate all the gun owners out there how to keep their guns out of the hands of the juveniles. Juveniles, we know, cannot go and purchase guns legally. So they either getting it illegally or getting it from a friend, or they're borrowing their parents' guns. So most part of this is education. We got to get into our schools, our community rec centers, our churches. And speaking of churches, we got to include our faith-based community and talk to them, because all of the juveniles, their parents are in church or their grandparents are in church. And we got to talk to them about one of the growing problems that we see with our juveniles. And we're going to hear, oh, it's not my kid. You don't know it's not your kid. And we're not saying it is your kid. It is your kid. But what we are saying, we have an epidemic of gun violence. The juveniles are committing crimes with guns. And some of it are accidental. Please lock your guns away and double check and talk to them about the dangers of guns. So we got to educate them up front through parents, schools, churches, community-based adults. Also, what I do now, I meet with juveniles on a weekly basis. Anyone can call me and say, we having a problem with this juveniles. And I can pick up the phone and call different guys that I know, and we go and talk to the juveniles. And we'll put 5 or 10 of them in a room and have a little talk to them about what's going on around the nation. How do you, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Next question's for William Gordon. How will you address active drug houses in Riviera Beach?
The active drug houses it's a multi-pronged approach. I mean, much like what my colleagues up here have already said, you have overt and covert operations, but more importantly, I think that you have to identify where the drugs are coming from. That's going to be involving some multi-agency task force, both at the local, county, state, and federal levels, using your intelligence to figure out where it's coming from and try to stop the flow. You can also incorporate with the drug houses, again, we talked about nuisance abatement, using the nuisance abatement program, start seizing these properties, seizing these houses. We have a very robust social media program, put that information out there. Where are drugs being sold? Embarrass these people, engage the community. They know what's going on. Again, like I said, the community, we can't be everywhere. We need the community's help. So we have to engage the community. They have to be able to come tell us. You have to tell us who you are. You can keep it anonymous. Give us the information and let us work it. We can work it on the intelligence side. There's other programs out there called, one that we use in my agency is called predictive policing. And we gather those statistics and we see where is that going to likely occur next. And we can use that. Go to the housing authorities. We can start revoking these Section 8 vouchers for families that are engaging in this type of activity or frauding the system and getting them out. Another program that we have based in the city of Lauderhill is called Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies. Getting those young mothers out there, providing them with the proper resources so they don't have to rely on drug income to help support their children, and all you're doing is manifesting the problem. So we can use our social services, we can use our enforcement services, we go after the nuisance abatement, we can use code enforcement. If we find that the drugs are being sourced out of local businesses, then we start bringing in the fire inspector. We can use them to go in and find violations. We can use Florida DPR. We can use the Florida Alcoholic Beverages and Tobacco. There's different resources and different agencies that have a lot of broad power and authority. It's just how can we bring that focus? So it's going to be an all-encompassing approach. When we do seize a house, put a billboard up in front of the house, mount it out there. This is a drug house. You saw for years when we seize cars, this vehicle purchased with forfeiture money. Get that information out there and have a holistic approach to it, an entire community approach. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rozier, what's your plan to decrease the juvenile gun violence that's plaguing the city of Riviera Beach?
Thank you for the question. Every day, our efforts are trying to decrease the gun violence, and a lot of that, unfortunately, is committed by some of the juveniles and young adults. One of the things we make sure we do, of course, is identify those people or juveniles who are responsible for most of the violence and target them to make sure that we first eliminate the problem that's happening. That's where we focus our efforts. But then we also have to collaborate. Nobody can do this alone, like each of the panel members are saying. It takes the whole community to effect this change that we need. It starts with engaging the youth. We do that in a lot of different ways. We do it through our school resource officers program. We do it through our community policing program. We have Explorers program that we take kids in and we mentor them and engage them to deter them from some of the efforts. We got people in the community that are a part of different organizations that provide services to the youth. I know Dr. Botel has collaborated with other, the school, Palm Beach, I believe it's Palm Beach State College, to provide them opportunities. And we have other members. I'm looking out in the audience and see various people who do things to help us combat this problem that we have. But the main thing is the engagement. We also make sure that we establish relationships with our state attorney's office in dealing with this. I've had personal conversations with Ms. Alicia Cox, Ms. Adrienne Ellis, Brian Fernandez. All are very helpful in our efforts to try to combat some of the criminal activity we're facing. And those have been very helpful, but there's still more that we can do, and we try to do more. We also try to provide other outlets for kids. We established our trunk or treat event for the community to come out so we can talk to the kids. They become more comfortable being with us, and it's an event that's very popular, and they look forward to coming to each and every year. We also have our annual National Night Out, which is mainly focused on dealing with the youth and the community, engaging them and having a positive effect on them. But at the same time, our main focus is to eradicate some of those people who are chronic as far as committing violent crime in the area. So we deal with them, we identify them, we make sure that they are in a criminal justice system, and then on the back end of that, try to provide them opportunities so they can change and not continue to engage in those type activities.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Coleman, how will you make the community safer?
Community safer. I would, of course, have my community policing philosophy. I would look at my deployment of my road patrol officers and see and evaluate their deployment scheme and seeing how they're patrolled. I would focus mostly on my crime analysts to see how the data and what crimes are being committed in the community, and I'll put together a team through a series of strategies such as IOP, intelligence-led policing, through geographical policing, through crime mapping and predictive policing. Based on the information I receive, I'll deploy my high liability teams to certain areas to deter those individuals from taking place in those communities. That's more like a directed patrol. But how I will make the community safer long term is go out there and communicate what the issues in the community, meet with those key stakeholders such as the pastors and the clergymen, and then sometimes there's activists in the community who have been incarcerated. I could use them as a mentor for some of those young men who out there who went astray, and try to communicate what they need to do to make the community safer itself. You create a lot of sports programs. A lot of kids enter sports, so you use a lot of those sports programs and outreach program to get these kids involved in something, so they were not being involved in crime and violence in the community. You work with the DARE program, some of those individuals in the DARE program. You work with some of the educators in the school system to make sure you can identify a kid that may need some mentoring. And you get that kid out there and you mentor that individual. But to make the community safer, if you have to have a crime-infested area through geographical policing, you'll deploy your high liability directed patrol unit, and if you have a area that needs some attention, you'll put together multiple different teams, which consist of a detective, a K-9 dog, some officers, and you go out there and make those communities safer that has some that crime in those certain areas, and you deploy those your resources effectively based on the data. But overall, it's going to be a constant communication with your community and utilizing the resources throughout Palm Beach County, not just in Riviera Beach.
Thank you. Ms. Chapman,
Yes, sir.
how will you make the community safer?
Okay, thank you, Chief Jenkins. As far as making the community safer, the number one priority for every police chief is to reduce crime, and in turn, that makes the city safer in itself. In order to do that, and we've all discussed it earlier, and I talked about it when I talked about building those trust and relationships. You have to have that trust with the community. You have to reach out to your community members and build that trust, because the accountability for making a community safer is not just on the police. It is on the community. It's on city government. It's everyone's responsibility. It needs to be a holistic approach, and everyone needs to be a part of the solution. The police department, we're here to do our jobs, but everyone needs to take part in helping to make the city safer. And how do you do that? You speak up. You become a part, you become our eyes and ears, like I said earlier, because we can't be everywhere. You have to reach out to us and report the incidents and be willing to cooperate when it comes time to testify in court, and, fulfill your requirements of that in order to make a successful prosecution and arrest. But you also need to have programs, especially programs for our youth, to get them occupied in doing something constructive instead of, having nothing to do, which tends to lead them down that path that sometimes there's no turning back. You put together programs for youth that, are just starting down that road, that you don't have to lock them up, because it's not about locking every juvenile up. Some of them need second chances. So you put programs in place to allow them different avenues, whether they're going back to school, whether, some type of vocational training or whatever it is, to give them a brighter future. But you need to focus those programs, working with Parks and Recs, whether it's the PAL program. I started an 8-week PAL summer camp, which took about 80 youth off the street from the ages of 5 to 13 for 8 weeks during the summer, and they spent the whole summer with the police department. So that kept them out of trouble. So you need to look at avenues to give them constructive activities so they're not getting into trouble. And then it just goes back to the principles of 21st century policing. President Obama put together some of the greatest minds in the nation, whether it was police practitioners, educators, individuals that are very familiar with building those trust and relationships and increasing the interactions between the police and the citizens and helping to reduce crime and making cities safer.
Thank you. Mr. Wells, what's your plan to decrease the juvenile gun violence that's plaguing the city of Riviera Beach?
Well, once again, take an aggressive approach to it. Have a three-pronged attack, community engagement. We can have investigation operations, initiate a drug task force, and also we can just do a strictly a neighborhood involvement engagement program where the neighbors give us information and we respond to it. I think really mentoring and education is the best way. It's cheaper for us. We catch it on the front end instead of catching it on the back end. When I was working out here, I was working undercover narcotics for about a year, and most of the drugs sold to me were by juveniles, and mostly all of them had guns. I feel that we should have certain levels of tolerance with the juveniles with the firearms. I truly believe in non-judicial punishment, warn and dismiss. But it's very difficult for me to warn and dismiss and give you leniency when you have a firearm and you're out here shooting people in the community. My responsibility is to make the community safe. When that juvenile take it upon his or herself to act in adult manner, my recommendation, use a firearm, you automatically direct filed upon, and you're treated as if you're an adult. You want to make an adult decision. It's not that I'm hard on them. I love kids more than anybody. I have them. But we have to put a stance to it because a lot of these programs that we're telling you about, they're out here. It's a lot of the police officers who engage in these matters that aren't organized. They do it themselves on an individual level. I know just about every Christmas I had officers buying the kids toys, trying to besiege their friendship. But once again, and I think it's been regurgitated over, we definitely need the help of the citizens, state, local, and federal government. And I think if it's hard, but the individual parents themselves have to help us. And unfortunately, in the community with the, where we are, and this is all over, the parents aren't raising the kids. It's the grandma or the auntie who's raising the children, and most of them are coming from a one-parent family, so they can't keep eyes on them. Therefore, we need to invoke some program, like I said later, basketball at night, something to do for the daytime. We have a lot of private funded programs right now. I know Reverend Parrish Church, his wife is involved with the young girls. So those programs, the police department need to engage them and give them funding.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Osgood, what measures will you implement to bridge the trust of police officers with the community? Great
question, Chief. Well, it's imperative that we always communicate with and get involved with our community through always in homeowners association meeting, which I'm sure that's probably going now. But even more so, when I was in the sheriff's office, we started seeing a trend of church violence shootings. So I implemented a plan to have our deputies to go by the church, and not just one deputy. One deputy may go 1 hour, an hour later, another deputy may go and speak. Go by the church on Sundays or Saturday, depending on which day of the week you have in church, and say hello. Stop in and just wave. Just stop in and wave. And that's one way of getting involved, bridging the gap. After that church service, you'll find that the minister, the pastor will come out and have a conversation with the deputy, the officer. And so once you start doing that, you have a open line of communication. We invite the minister, the pastor, the reverend, to different types of community events that we put on through each community. We have like Uniting Broward or United in one city. We put together different events, and we invite all the faith-based ministries to come out, the school principals, every school's principal for this, for that school district, and all the homeowners association or the community leaders to come out. And we make sure that we go out and have a conversation with them. I would also have me and the command staff would go out on a routine basis, not on a time matter, just routine, doesn't make a difference what day of the week, and meet with the community. Say hello, just hello. And it's gonna be a top-down effect where you're gonna see the majors doing it, lieutenants, sergeants, officers going out, meet with the community, saying hello. Get on their bicycle, get on their foot, and just go out and walk the community, say hello to people as they walk on the street. We're not here to arrest you, it's just a hello. And what are your problems? Do you have any concerns? And if they have concerns, let's hear it. Take out your pen and paper, jot it down, come back, and it's a real, whatever you tell me is real. I'm gonna jot it down, and we're gonna put it in a log. Community engagement today, this is the concerns on this block. And after you do this a number of times, you're gonna find out that the community members know your name and you know their names. We're gonna learn their names, and I would like to get to know, block at a time, every family's names on the block, whether it's a good family or a bad family. If it's a family that's a violent family, quote unquote drug house, or the good family. I wanna know your name, but we're gonna get involved in engagement because sometimes you can make a good person, a bad person go good.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gordon, how will you make the community safer?
Again, keeping all the things that we've discussed out here, it's all about community engagement. We talk about the youth, but I think one section of the youth that we forget about is the older teens. Getting out, doing the community engagement, the different community projects and events that the city has are great. But part of we want to do is divert them from criminal activity. And what drives them to criminal activity is a lot of it is money. Here in the city of Riviera Beach, there are a number of Fortune 500 companies. You have UPS, FedEx, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Tropical, you have the port. Get these older teenagers, get them engaged in a trade. Get them out there and learn about what are the opportunities that they have to educate themselves, to be more involved in their community and get them a stable job where they have an income and they can feel proud of what they're doing. Again, using the different, what I call the neighborhood engagement teams, getting them out there, building that trust, knowing who the community's leaders are, meeting with them, understanding what the problems each individual community faces, because what's happening in one section of the city is not impacting the other, and you can't just have a blanket approach. You have to have that holistic approach. You have to go in and be involved. And part of that involvement, and I think sometimes we lose track of that, is the enforcement side. We don't want to lose our juveniles. In Broward, we have implemented a civil citation program so that they're not going into adulthood with a strike against them. In my particular city, in Lauderhill, we have an adult civil citation program for nonviolent misdemeanor crimes that the adults, the young adults, aren't starting off with that strike against them. That they can go through the civil program, and we can divert it for those misdemeanor nonviolent crimes or minor drug possession. So it's engaging the community. Again, we can't do it by ourselves, folks. We need you. You are that extra patrol unit that I have out there. And we need you to engage with us. Tell us what your problems are and how we can help you solve those problems. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rozier, how will you address the active drug houses?
Yes, thank you. I can say that we put a lot of effort into addressing drug houses that are currently in our city. What we try to do, first of all, starts with open lines of communications, knowing what areas we are having problems in, communicating with the public, and encouraging the public and citizens to provide us with information so we'll know where these problem houses are. A lot of times people are afraid for their safety, so they may be hesitant to bring information forward. So they got to be able to trust the officers that they're giving this information to. So it's important for us to keep this information confidential so we can investigate it without jeopardizing the citizens that provide that information to us. But a lot of times our undercover agents and our investigative units, once they identify these drug houses, we make sure that we target them, do surveillance, and a lot of times we have done many search warrants and arrests based on information we receive from the public. So that's very important. Not only that, we often use our nuisance abatement vehicle. If it's found out that a particular area is having drug sales, we'll place that vehicle in that area, kind of record what's going on in the area. We'll make sure the officers are patrolling that area heavily and passing on the intelligence information to our respective investigative divisions to follow up on those drug complaints. We also work very thoroughly with our federal and state attorney's office in making sure that we prosecute these people that are selling the drugs. One of the things we've always done is we've tried to make sure that once we do eradicate a problem in the area, we try to make sure it doesn't come back. And that means continuous engagement with the citizens in those areas, ongoing engagement. So oftentimes you can think you have a problem eliminated and you move on to the next problem only for it to resurface again if no one is paying attention to what's happening in those areas. So that's why it's very important to continue the engagement with the citizens in those areas to make sure the problem doesn't come back, or if it does come back, to try to address that problem immediately. And I'm looking at some of the people in the audience right now who have been very helpful in eradicating problems in their area. Some of the homeowners association groups, we try to participate in them so we can get this information, and a lot of times they are very helpful to us, and they feel comfortable in these type settings to provide information to us so we can help out with these situations. So that's very important. It's also very important on the other end, as far as the prosecution side of them, to make sure that these drug dealers are given the sentences they should get. But we also have to provide services that they can be reformed also and have other opportunities.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman,
Yes, sir.
what's your plan to decrease the juvenile gun violence that's plaguing the city of
Gun
Riviera Beach?
violence. I'm not going to limit it just to juveniles. I'm limited to just gun violence in the city. There's, but to the juvenile gun violence that's taking place in the city, that in the schools, I want to have a DARE program, which they have a DARE program, and start discussing the importance of not touching guns in the schools. Do a DARE program with our SRO officers. And that starts very young, starts very early by educating these young kids. But also right now, the gun violence in Riviera Beach is, from what I've been, based on my research and information, some of it is limited to a few gangs in the city. Some of the gangs that I'm familiar with, and the community may be familiar with, the Dirty Road Gang, S.L. Boys, and Buck Wild, and the Firehouse. Those are gang members that's committing majority of the gun violence in the city. If they are documented gang, or documented as gang members, and if they're documented as a gang member, they will be enhanced. They'll get enhancement in in the court system as far as sentencing. So I'll target those gang members that's taking place, that's happening in Riviera Beach right now, and punish them accordingly. And those the individuals, how to track them down and target them, create that multi-agency unit, because what's happening to all these gangs, they're going from Lake Park, Riviera Beach to West Palm Beach, back and forth. So you got to create this multi-agency task force to target them, and to arrest them and to sentence them accordingly. If you have a juvenile that may just possess a gun without using it, I'm also in favor of a diversion program for a young man who may just touch a gun for one time and never utilized it. I'm also, in the county has a juvenile first offender program where you can, it's a diversion program for the individual. But that individual used that gun, you have to prosecute him to the full extent or direct file on the individual. Also, those certain areas that these gang members hanging in, we need to do a zero tolerance in that area and make sure they're not moving around freely and selling guns. And also, what we failed to realize, that we have areas that have a lot of slum and blight. We have all these foreclosed, the abandoned houses where kids like to hang at. They keep their guns in there. So we need to eradicate, make the community safer by removing the slum and blight in the community that a lot of these gang members and a lot of these gun-toting juveniles like to hang at. So it's not that just arresting them, it's not just targeting them. You need to eliminate their environment, take the complete environment away, and prosecute them when you need to.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. This will wrap up what Chief Jenkins has done for us tonight in asking these questions. I want to give him a round of applause, everyone. Thank you. So we'll have 3 more questions to get through the end of the night, but these are only 1-minute questions. So this is a speed round. These are bonus questions. The questions you all just heard, these were from the audience. These were from the community. They had submitted their questions on Twitter and Facebook. So that's the questions you all just heard, and we gave the most time to those questions. So this is a bonus question, and it came from Chief Jenkins, and I thought it was a really good question to ask, and you will all only have 1 minute to answer this one. I'm going to go in order from left to right, and I'm going to start with Ms. Chapman. Tell us about your biggest ethical challenge and how did you resolve it?
Great question. So my biggest ethical challenge that I faced as chief of police, it happened probably a couple years ago, where I had an officer involved in an officer-involved shooting. He was, and what I did as chief, I had an independent agency, the Virginia State Police, come in and investigate those officer-involved shootings at the time. So keeping in mind that the Virginia State Police did an internal or external criminal investigation into the shooting, we also did an administrative investigation, as we normally do. Subsequently, and I can't say too much about it because it is still an ongoing criminal case, but subsequently, I have received information internally that he was cleared from the internal investigation because of information we had. I forgot it's a minute.
sorry.
I'm sorry.
This is a tough question, and
forgot
1 minute's
it's a
going to fly by.
Think about it first.
Thank you so much.
Give a minute. You got to give us a minute to think about that question.
Only a
I
minute.
went down, I was like, man, this is getting interesting, but time's running out. Okay, thank you so much.
Don't hate me.
Sorry.
Too
I
late.
can't
I wanted to
answer
hear
that
what
in
she
a
had to
minute.
say.
Put you on the spot earlier. Give us time to think about that one.
All right. So for Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
please tell us about your biggest ethical challenge and how did you resolve it?
Well, I had time to think about the question when she was responding.
Can I get a second chance?
Yeah, but my most ethical dilemma when I was in charge of a drug unit, and I had a young man who was back in the unit, and he took a relationship with some of the confidential informants. It was in those units you have to value your informants, and you can't put yourself in a liability situation. I wasn't one of my best friends in that unit, and I had to remove that individual from the unit because he jeopardized the operation. He didn't jeopardize the organization. He jeopardized the brand of the organization. So I had to remove one of my best friends from a unit because he was no longer valuable to the organization, and he was tarnishing the reputation of the rest of the men in my organization. So I had to remove the individual from from my unit.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon, tell us about your biggest ethical challenge and how did you resolve it?
My biggest ethical challenge came from when I served in internal affairs. I received information that one of our officers was completing a auto theft report, but had signed the auto theft affidavit for the victim and committed fraud. When they came in to give the statement, they lied to me, and this is a person that I trained, that I knew very well. So I had to complete and take this to the state attorney's office and complete a probable cause affidavit on someone that I was friends with. The way that I resolved it so that I can get through it was I completed the whole probable cause affidavit, but the last thing that I entered was his name. I had to be fair and impartial. I had to realize that this is for the betterment of the agency, and friendship aside, they did something wrong and I had to take action.
Thank you. Mr. Osgood, tell us about your biggest ethical challenge and how did you resolve it?
I'm surprised at that. No, teasing. All right, so one day I overheard when I was a sergeant in the narcotic unit, I overheard two detectives discussing a probable cause affidavit. And one detective was supposed to co-sign it. He read it, he says to the other detective, and they didn't see me in the room, he says, "You fabricated everything in this report." He said, "It's okay to lie a little, but completely?" So I'm thinking, are they joking? Do they see me? So I stood up and I looked at him. I said, "Let me see that report." And they were, "Oh, no." He said, "You ripped it." So I know. I said, "Let me see it." Now, these are two guys who are friends of mine, and I take a look at the report. I say, "So what happened?" So the other guy tells me, he said, "Well, here's the story." And he tells me the story, he cleans it up. I said, "That's nothing like this in this report." So I forwarded the information, I wrote it up and sent it to IA on both of the guys, and they were my friends.
Thank you. Mr. Rozier.
Yes.
Tell us about your biggest ethical challenge and how did you resolve it?
Yes, while everybody else was answering their question, I was trying to come up with another scenario to avoid what I'm going to talk about right now. But because it was so recent, it's just the thing that sticks in my mind the most. Unfortunately, we had to terminate a couple of officers. It was well publicized about those cases, and it involved juvenile or young women, young adults. Well, in fact, they were children, minors. One of those situations, the person was considered an adult, but because of the youth organization they were involved in, we thought the ethical violation that was committed was so damaging that it was no way we can keep that person on board of this police department because it went against everything we represented. So even though you may have some split emotions among members of the police department, I thought it was the right thing that we did.
Thank you. Mr. Wells, tell us about your biggest ethical challenge and how did you resolve it?
Well, mine was nothing as grave as theirs. Actually, it's kind of simple, but it's deep. Had a friendship, a guy I've known for 12 years. We were working together, but he began sandbagging on the shift. People say I was giving favoritism to him, and I saw it teetering that way. So I just had to change the shift so we can remain friends. And today's, we still are. And I thought it was unfair, which I started letting it slide for him to get away with things that the other guys on the shift couldn't get away with.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. All right. The next question is going to come from the audience. You will still have only 1 minute to answer that question. And I'm going to start this time with Mr. Osgood, and we're going to switch it up so that the people at the end can go in first this time. That's how we like to do it. All right, so bear with me, the person who presented this question, because I have to interpret your handwriting and what you mean, okay? I'm going to try to do my best here. And this is a good question. I'm trying to figure out how to word it, okay? In your work experience, based on your work experience, rather, what vision do you have for the city that you can use and implement your past skills and work history and take the city of Riviera Beach forward in the police department?
That is a good question. I envision the city of Riviera Beach to be that beachfront property, the beautiful city that when you see on TV that everybody want to come through. I have worked in cities that had a reputation of violent crimes, and we went in there and we really took down, the first step is you reduce the crime, and then through CRAs you start building projects and help giving it back on track. That's my vision for the city. We're going to reduce crime, and we're going to clean up the so-called, not many, blighted areas. And some of it's going to be through officer help, and a lot of it's going to be through CRAs. And we're going to help make the city the beachfront property resort-looking city that it deserves to be, to match other luxurious cities around the country.
Thank you. Mr. Rozier, based on your work experience, what is your vision for the city of Riviera Beach that would allow you to implement your past work history and skills to take the city forward?
Well, I've been fortunate enough to work for 4 different law enforcement organizations. 1 starting on the Air Force, 2, I worked for 20 years in the town of Palm Beach, 3, I went into Albany, Georgia Police Department, and I ended up here. So what I see, I can use all the skills I've learned in each of these agencies to help improve the city. Singer Island is very similar to issues I faced in the town of Palm Beach. The center part of town is issues we faced in Albany, Georgia. It was just a bigger population. The West Side community, some of their concerns. So my idea is for our agency to become a world-class state and a CLEA accredited organization to equip and build upon the strength of our men and women that serve the police department, and to collaborate with our citizens to keep making this community the absolute best that it can be. And I know we can do it together.
Thank you. Mr. Wells, based on your work experience, what is your vision? What vision do you have for the city of Riviera Beach that will allow you to implement your actual work history and move the city forward?
I need to make my police officers better and make them greater with their skill sets. One thing I learned while working with the Department of Defense, 2 things we had there that was prevalent, rollover, professional development, and the health and wellness program. On the professional development, I think we need to increase their training and education in the respective fields that they're serving right now. I did a survey during this process. Only less than about 1/5 of them have a college degree. In regards to the health and wellness, that's something that DOD pushes very well. Having them do a PT test, get enrolled in a fitness program, it helps the city with the insurance risks, and it also makes a person a better person to serve the community. They cannot serve you well if they aren't mentally fit, and also it helps with the intelligence quota too, as well, serving you. But we need to get our officers in shape. We need to get them trained so they can better serve the public.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon, based on your previous work experience, what vision do you have for the city of Riviera Beach that would allow you to implement your previous work history and move the city forward?
Well, my previous work experience has been with the city of Lauderhill, and I had the opportunity to be at the ground level when that agency began. So I helped build that agency. A lot of the pitfalls that are facing the Riviera Beach Police Department right now are problems and issues that I tackled in my 23 plus years with the city of Lauderhill. So I think I can help make that a smoother transition. I do agree with Mr. Wells. We do need to increase our training and our education. We have to stop making the Riviera Beach Police Department the training ground for the rest of the police departments in Palm Beach County. We want to make this the premier law enforcement agency. We want officers to be competing to come to us, as opposed to going to other agencies, and build that community involvement, get them involved, get them educated, get them trained, get them out there in the community, and make Riviera Beach the destination vacation city that we can work, play, and live in.
Mr. Coleman, I'm sorry, thank you. Thank you,
Good
Mr.
job.
Gordon. Mr. Coleman, based on your previous work experience, what vision do you have for the city of Riviera Beach that would allow you to implement your previous work history and move the city forward?
I want to make Riviera Beach a destination spot where people want to work, live, and play, first of all. Secondly, my previous work experience, I worked on the Weed and Seed concept for many, many years in Delray. I would want to, with my previous experience, make it the best community policing unit in the county, if not the country. I want to eliminate crime through the Weed and Seed concept in the communities. I want to eliminate slum and blight by using the CRA, using different organizations, Habitat, organizations to remove slum and blight, use code enforcement to remove slum and blight within the community so crime will not be in those low-income communities. And I also want to use the model of broken window theories. And I also want to create future leaders in the community with the youth, internally and externally within the city of Riviera Beach.
Thank you. Ms. Chapman, based on your previous work experience, what is your vision for the city of Riviera Beach based on implementing your previous work history to move the city forward?
Okay, so first of all, I've also had an opportunity to serve in 3 different police departments, and I've also had an opportunity to serve for the last 3 years as chief of police. So as chief of police, I was able to accomplish everything that is expected of a chief, which includes reducing crime, building those collaborative partnerships and relationships with our community, as well as diversifying my police department. So my vision for the department would be that it is an ethical, high-performing organization that embraces diversity and treats everyone with respect and dignity, a department that is accredited and has the utmost integrity and has a great reputation around the city, and for not only the city of Riviera Beach to be a destination of choice, but for our police department to be a destination of choice. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time. I'll read one more audience question because we have to get to closing remarks, which are 3 minutes each. And so we'll have one more 1-minute question. This person's question is, they're asking, how can you change things in the city? And he said that his mother's car was totaled in a high-speed chase recently here in the city of Riviera Beach. So I'll start that question with Mr. Rozier. How can you change things in the city?
Well, as far as change goes, I think we've come a long way in changing things. When I first got here, one of the biggest things that I noticed right away was that this agency is second to none as far as handling critical incidents on the street. They deal with a lot of dangerous situations on a regular basis, and they're excellent at doing that. The one thing that I saw that needed to be improved, and I like to think I'm known for that, is to increase our level of professionalism in what we do. And professionalism includes a lot of things. And that only includes how you look, how you dress, how you speak to each other, how you speak to the citizens, how you treat them, how the pride you take in doing your job and the service that you provide to the community. So that's how you first start to change things, to build trust with the community and demand excellence from the officers within. As far as the gentleman's grievance about his mother's car, that was brought to our attention. We have done a full investigation on that, and I will be happy to share the results of that investigation with him after this meeting is over.
Thank you. Mr. Osgood, how can you change things in the city?
First, what I'm about to say doesn't mean that it's not currently going on. But I'm going to make sure we're accountable to our customers, our citizens, accountable for every action or an inaction that they or concerns they have. So if there's a complaint of a car being damaged, I'm going to make sure we look into this. There's going to be a report written, and it's going to be documented. And within 24 hours, that report would be on the desk of risk management to find out what happened. And that person under investigation with us, if it's an investigation, there's probably a reason why information's not been released. However, he is owed answers. We got to find out why didn't he get his information or the car taken care of. So that's first, it's a risk management, get it over to risk management, and we're going to send people out to communicate with him the very next day, as soon as he called. And I don't mean the first line supervisor. One of the command staff's got to go out and talk to him.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon, how can you change things in this city?
Again, to piggyback off what my colleagues have said, we have to engage with the community. In this particular instance, and in any instance that we deal with, communication is the key, and it has to be timely. There is nothing worse than a victim feeling like they've been re-victimized because we are not addressing their concerns. In this particular instance, or in any instance, whether it be the car crash or a victim of a burglary or a rape, we owe them to do a full and complete investigation and get them the answers they need. And if we don't have those answers, get them to the right department that does and get it taken care of. We don't want to re-victimize people who've already been victimized. It's not our way, and I won't allow it.
Thank you. Mr. Wells, how can you change things in this city?
I feel in that case there, once we've held the officers accountable, we've induced a good bit of deal of policy and oversight. I think next we need to train all our officers on a scenario-based case in that matter, to advise them on the reporting procedures, the command structure procedure, who they go to. And we need to reassure the citizens that this won't happen again. We need to open our hearts and our arms with complete transparency into the matter and let them know if we can't tell them at that point, at the initial phase of investigation, what's going on, but stay connected with them and let them know that we're not trying to conceal anything. And once again, for the rest of the department, I think we need to train them on that issue there. And every time you have an issue of that nature, I think we should bring in a training mechanism so it doesn't reoccur with someone else.
Thank you. Ms. Chapman,
Yes.
how can you change things in this city?
Okay, first of all, it goes back to the principles of 21st century policing. And one of those principles is policy and oversight. And it's my understanding that in relation to policy, this was the pursuit policy that had been recently changed. So it's a matter of oversight and accountability, ensuring that my supervisors are monitoring pursuits and that they are in line. The first thing I would do is look at policies and procedures, and especially the pursuit policy. I recently changed the pursuit policy in my former agency, but the key is to make sure there is oversight and then individuals are held accountable if they are not adhering to policy. I'm not saying, I don't know the background, so I'm not saying that these individuals were not within policy, but it is up to us as the command staff, as the chief, to ensure that policy is being followed, and then those are being held accountable if it's not.
Thank you. Did we get to you as well, Mr. Coleman?
Not yet.
Okay.
How would I change
I
things?
figured that, but I said, usually I write it down. I thought I had it in my mind, but last but definitely not
Yes.
least.
What I would do as far as change things, continuous training for our officers is imperative. If you train well, you're more effective at your job, and direct oversight and accountability of each individual officers. An officer who failed to do a job, you have to immediately investigate that, send it to Internal Affairs or do an investigation of it, and if that individual is found to be neglecting his responsibilities, you have to address it accordingly. Because once you lose the trust of your community, it can hurt the brand of 120 officers in your organization, as well as the entire organization. So you can't let an officer be negligent in his responsibility without taking immediate action. But I think, and also immediate training, being accredited in the agency, is have continuous policies that can hold everybody to a certain standard.
Thank you. That concludes all of the questions portion of this. Now we would like closing remarks. Yes, you all will have 3 minutes for those, so we're going to get our timer set to 3 minutes. And once we do that, I'm going to go in order of left to right. And we'll have you started off, Ms. Chapman.
First of all, thank you again for this opportunity to sit before you as one of your finalists. I believe I'm the only candidate up here that has served 3 years as an actual chief of police. And during those 3 years, I was able to accomplish everything that is expected of a chief. Like I said, I was able to reduce crime. I was able to diversify my police department, as well as build trusting and collaborative relationships with my community. If I am selected as your chief, I will be a chief that understands that it's not just about locking individuals up, but it's about lifting up a community. It's not just about it's also about building trust and hope with the community, and not and alleviating fear and misunderstanding about law enforcement. Like I said earlier, I will definitely look for my department to be highly ethical, a high-performing organization that embraces diversity and treats everyone with respect. One of the first priorities would be to get them accredited, national accreditation, state accreditation, make sure they are duly trained and educated, and also have the utmost integrity as far as going forward. I will employ all the principles of 21st century policing, because they are evidence-based and data-driven methods to ensure that we achieve total success within the police department. And I want to thank City Manager Evans for this opportunity. Thank you very much for putting on this process. It has been an intense process, and I appreciate the opportunity to sit before you all. I'd like to thank Chief Jenkins and Ms. Walker for moderating tonight, and I would like to wish the best of luck to all of our candidates here tonight. And I thank you all for coming out and enjoying this time with us. Thank you.
Mr. Coleman, your
Yes,
closing remarks?
Thank you, Ms. AJ. First of all, I'd like to say thank the city manager for allowing me to be part of such a rigorous process. It's very challenging. And I want to thank my applicants for allowing me to pick their brain as we go through this rigorous process, and not worry about who gets the job. We all are law enforcement practitioners, and whoever gets this job, I'm pretty sure we all will be calling each other for ideas to make the Riviera Beach one of the best places to work, live, and play. I've been working in Palm Beach County my entire career. I have the resources that can come in day one to implement change in your organization. I do know that the city manager wants to be a community policing program, implement a community policing program, and top-down approach. I believe I have the skill set to do that from top to bottom, and be a change agent internally to create the future leaders in this organization. My job is day one is to create a plan of action for the future, create a succession plan that everyone in this organization understand their job, not to worry about what's going on externally. For the most part, you build your brand and you become the best officer you can be. I have that skill set. I work extensively with gangs. I work extensively with community policing. I work extensively with juveniles. My mentors are in this county. They're a phone call away. And I have the skill set and the academic background to do what Mr. Evans in the community wants done in an efficient and effective manner. If I'm chosen to be your chief, you will get a continuous, hungry, passionate individual will come to your city and work until he's extremely tired and will drop down. Because I love what I've seen thus far in this city, and I appreciate the people who work and live here, and I want to be part of that transition that Mr. Evans is creating in his organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon?
Again, thank you to everyone coming out here to be a part of this process. Thank you to Mr. Evans, but more importantly, thank you to all the city staff who made all of this possible, all the behind-the-scenes work that you've done to get this to where we are today. Has been a phenomenal job. Thank you. Thank you to my other candidates that are here. This hasn't been a cutthroat process. We've all collaborated during the day. We've all talked, and it's been a great experience for me. The experience that I have with the city of Lauderhill is directly proportional to what the city of Riviera Beach is seeing right now with their police department. Again, I had the opportunity to help build the Lauderhill Police Department from the ground up. And the different issues that are facing the Riviera Beach Police Department are those hurdles that I have already overcome, those potholes, those problems, and the skill set that I can bring both with my law enforcement and my military background. I'm also, I teach at both the Broward and Palm Beach Police Academy, so I understand the mindset of the new officers that are coming in and understand that we have to change and we have to adapt. To bring forward the vision of Mr. Evans and the rest of the city is be able to influence that and to push it forward. I believe in mentorship. I believe in that I should be training the people that work for me to take my job. I'm not going to have this forever. The next chief of police of Riviera Beach is out there right now patrolling the street, and we have to develop that person and bring them up through the ranks. We don't need to be in this position where we're going outside. We are Riviera Beach family. We want to keep it a family. Families are going to fight, but at the end of the day, they're going to be together. The experience that I have and the passion that I want to be involved, I want to immerse myself in the city, get out there with the officers. I'm a lead from the front type person. I've always said that when they put stripes on my sleeve or when they put brass on my collar, they didn't break my badge. I'm an officer. I will get out there. I do it now. I'm a command officer, but I drive a marked patrol car. I'm not in an unmarked car. I'm out there doing the job, staying in touch with what our officers are dealing with day to day. And I'm not behind a desk, although I'll probably find myself there a lot more if I'm selected as your police chief. But it's important that I get out there, be a part of the community, be a part of my department. And that's what I look forward to doing. Thank you all so much for being out here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Osgood?
Thank you. To the community, first of all, thank you for coming out. It would have been pretty bad for the six of us to be here speaking to no one. But, so give yourself a big hand. So I thank you for coming out and listening to what we have to say. Mr. Evans, thank you. This process has been something that I've never experienced like this. This type of interview, I haven't experienced it, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. I appreciate it, and it's something I'm going to take with me forever. So I have supervised more. I came from a large agency, 5,000, nearly 6,000 employees, actually. I commanded more than 500 employees at one time. So with that, I was responsible for each and everything, and the buck stopped with me, each and everything the employees did. So I had to make sure I was with them every day. I would visit roll calls in the morning. Some roll calls started at 5 a.m., some starts at 6 a.m. I would stay that day, get my administration work done, and do roll calls in the evenings at times, only to turn around at night to respond to a shooting scene or some type of scene. Well, with that said, I'm a hardworking individual. I work at times 7 days a week, but that's not bragging. It's to be expected once you take on this role. I'm also the person, and I take pride in this, I take pride in going out in the community. Two things on here. I love tackling the problem areas. I live for the problem areas. I remember when I was a young rookie cop, what I considered punishment, I was moved from the rough areas from working to go and work in the area for 2 months on the beach where I didn't see anything go by. Every now and then I saw a car go by or wind, like shook hands, but that was my community policing skills. I went to the problem areas to work again, and I went there and I love tackling the problems, whether it's auto theft, gang violence, drug crimes, and I didn't just make the arrest. I did it honestly and by the book. Throughout my 34 years of law enforcement, I have no complaints, investigations against me. I make sure, I'm the guy who makes sure I did everything properly. Now, if you make a complaint, I can't stop you from making a complaint. But there was never in my past, any types of scandals. And I say this because it's hard to work that long in law enforcement and not get caught up in something a little stupid. Now, again, I take pride on how I went out and tackled the community and made the community safer, to the point that I get tapped on the shoulder, my unit, my team, we have to go into another city and work and do the same thing over there.
Thank you. Mr. Rozier?
Yes, thank you. Again, like everyone said, thank you very much for this process. It has been very intense, but very rewarding at the same time, because I know I belong in it. What I want to start off with real quickly, just to clarify things, I thought I would talk to the gentleman privately to clarify the results of the investigation, but because people don't know the details, they're referring to policy violations. I just want to make it clear that we fully investigated what happened with this situation and determined there was no policy violation, and it was done by one of our majors of police. So I'll be happy to share that with you, but I just don't want that cloud over the men and women of the police department. So with that being said, this comes to an accumulation of 30 years of work for me. I am from the city of Riviera Beach. I grew up right across the railroad tracks. Usually you bring in somebody from the outside when you don't have somebody inside that can get the job done. I'm telling you that I know I am the person for the job, not only through the dedication and sacrifice that my family and extended family, many of the people I'm looking at right in this audience here, as far as Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, their son Eric was one of my best friend. We dealt with all the challenges of growing up in a neighborhood like that we did. What I'm telling you is that I'm ready for the job. I've worked hard to achieve the educational achievements that I've achieved, 2 master's degrees. I've went to the highest, most thorough advanced law enforcement training schools, and I've had experience in 4 different agencies with very different type cultures. I am ready for this job. I've been doing the job, and I will make sure that the officers do their job not only well, but with the highest degree of professionalism, and we're definitely going to raise standards, and we are going to achieve state and a CALEA accreditation. It's just a matter of time. So I'm the person for the job, and I'm asking that you guys continue to support whoever gets elected. But I'm saying I am the one that already knows the community, knows the people. Many of the things they're talking about doing, we're already doing. We're well known for the use of our technology. Many of the local police department came to us to start their shot spotter technology. They came to see what we were doing. We have a real-time crime center that addresses a lot of the criminal activity that's going on in the city. We're engaged with the community already through our Explorers program. We just had Shot with the Cop, but we brought in children in the community, so give them gifts and chances to shop for their families that they probably wouldn't have gotten before. We are totally engaged. We can do better, and we will do better, but I'm telling you, we don't have to look outside. You have somebody right here that will get the job done, is getting the job done, and will continue to get the job done. So that's the one thing I want to make sure that everybody knows.
Thank you. Mr. Wells?
First of all, let me thank the city manager, the council people, and the community who stood by me for some 22 years, ever since 1984. A lot of you all know my story. There were some hiccups along the way, but I dedicated myself to the city with my blood, my sweat, my passion. Basically, I believe I was the original inventor of community policing, because I would stand out there on the block as long as I could with the guys, trying to maybe mentor them, even losing a few foot races with them to try to let them know, hey, you can make a change, you can make things better. You all made me better. You made me work hard. Not everybody was pleased because if you went on a domestic, one person going to be happy, the other one was going to be sad. But nevertheless, I really enjoyed the time I spent here. I think I've made a significant contribution to the city throughout my 22 years of service. Everything from the small things, well, not really a small thing. The work I did with the pension board, the work I did with the police union. We increased people's educations. We increased their college assistance fund. We also increased their health benefits. So a lot of people benefit by some things. And I can truly say that the nature of our work is not to see how many people we can lock up, but how many people we can keep out of jail. I truly believe that, and that was my cause ever since I came here from day one. I truly believe from day one I was being groomed to be a police chief because I care about people. There's nothing else I can say. I can be here for a long time regurgitating my past, my history, but I got something as a young man at 17. I was one of the few in the United States in the top half of the top 1% of the United States Air Force in the security service of the Air Force with crypto signal intelligence, top secret clearance. From there, I moved forward. I became a captain in the United States Army Reserves, working with the Special Forces Operation Command in a leadership position. Here at Riviera Beach, I've held several leadership positions from the rank of sergeant up through lieutenant. Then I had the informal leadership leadership position of just speaking to the young officers that I command. The gentleman mentioned training. When I was here the first time, I believe in training. I tell my sergeant, I don't want you to work the road the day you let the patrol do it. I tell the captain, you don't work the road the day you let the sergeant do it, and so forth. We need to train our people up. We need to go back to in-service training, something we stopped about 12 years ago, and I have a way we can go back to in-service training. It doesn't cost the city one dime. Yes, I am going to save the city about $120,000 by going to in-service training without paying for overtime or anything. I would like to be your police chief. I believe I was your police chief in spirit when I was here the first time. And a lot of you all, I think, have respect for me, and that's why you are out here today. I love you, and I truly appreciate you. And I don't need nothing else for you all. You've given me everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause to all of our candidates. I would like to take this time right now to acknowledge and thank our city manager, Mr. Jonathan Evans, who is here with us tonight. Hello, Mr. Evans. Thank you. I would also like to thank Councilwoman Julia Botel, who is here with us tonight. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank our city attorney, Ms. Dawn, who is here tonight. Dawn Nguyen. And of course, I would like to thank again Chief Rick Jenkins for his support in asking those questions tonight, helping us moderate.
The smooth professional part of this was all Ms. Walker.
Thank you. And of course, I have to thank our timekeeper, Miss Marcia Noel, who's kept us on track tonight. Thank you. All right, with that being said, my final closing remarks is that the purpose of the public involvement in this process is that we at the City of Riviera Beach understand that the chief of police will ultimately be in charge of an agency where the actions of the employees could ultimately lead to a person losing their freedom. The police department is also tasked with keeping all of us safe. So this is a very important job, and we support you, and that's why we've gone through tremendous measures, our city manager did, to make sure that they narrow it down to the right candidate. On that note, this concludes our City of Riviera Beach Police Chief Meet and Greet. Good night, everyone. Thank you.